is author of Be the Change, also author of the book we want to talk to him about, Chivalry, the quest for a personal code of honor in an unjust world. Zach, welcome to the program.
Hey there. Thank you so much. It's great to be here.
Zach, let me ask you something. This is a book about justice as well as other traits that Christians should demonstrate. When we talk about justice, can you define that for a Christian? There's all kinds of groups demanding justice. How does a Christian define justice?
Yeah, well, I would say justice is righting a wrong committed against somebody or giving someone what they deserve. But, we see that God's justice, or I believe that God's justice is contrasted with mercy, so that we don't always get what we deserve. But basically, my idea of chivalry and how that stems from justice is that my whole generation is really into social justice, not necessarily funded by the government, but churches and small groups of citizens doing their job and taking care of the poor and the oppressed. And that's something that I have cared a lot about, seeing the example that Jesus set to care for the poor. But while pursuing what a lot of people would call social justice, I saw that there was this huge inconsistency between my behavior to people halfway around the world, caring for them, and then my behavior towards my friends and my family. I saw that I was treating the people closest to me like garbage, and I realized that I had to change, and that's when I wrote this book on chivalry.
Do you sometimes there's now I'm looking at your picture on your book. Mm-hmm. You look. I'm soon to be 55, so you look like you're in your 20s or 30s.
I'm 21.
You're 21. Well, very mature 21. Good for you. So let me ask you this. I've heard, I've read studies and so on and so forth that your generation, which has grown up with social media. My generation did not. We just play catch up. But you guys have grown up with social media, and I've read stories that say that perhaps because of that, your generation has less empathy. They're not as attuned to the human face because they have not interacted quite as much face to face. It's been over, screens, big and small. Do you buy that? Do you think your generation maybe struggles with being a little more empathetic towards people?
I think there's definitely a huge risk of that, and I talk about it in a chapter called "I Will Not Attack from Behind." It was a principle the Knights lived by, even a lot of cowboys lived by. They wouldn't shoot somebody in the back, and that's something that applies today in terms of like modern day verbal backstabbing or talking about somebody, sort of airing somebody's dirty laundry, which is easier to do with Facebook and Twitter, other social media elements. But I would say that if people have a firm grasp on reality and have a basis for compassion and empathy, Facebook and Twitter can actually be great tools for connecting to people, causes you care about, and expressing empathy and compassion and love to people that are that you would never have a chance to meet in person. So it really depends on the individual. I think there are a lot of selfish millennials. I think there are a lot of selfish baby boomers. It's part of the human condition.
We're talking to Zach Hunter about his book, Chivalry, the quest for a personal code of honor in an unjust world. What's, Tim?
No, go ahead.
I was going to say, Chivalry's kind of one of those, and by the way, you have some great stuff. You're obviously a fan of Calvin and Hobbes in here. I love Calvin and Hobbes. You like Westerns because of cowboy codes. Chivalry. Okay, it's the concept of in the medieval times of a knight.
Today it's called sexist.
Yeah, what is chivalry? How's it physically expressed?
Yeah, well, actually, my definition of chivalry, if you look in, it says an epic quest. That's the intro to the book. I talk about how if the chivalry is going to mean anything, it can't just be for men. Even though I believe, guys need to open doors and pull out chairs if that's what the women in their life need or want, and I do that. I felt like our generation, or my generation, needed a broader definition of chivalry. Needed something that they could all get on board with and to commit to, not a list of rules, but principles that we could believe in, that we could internalize, that could change us inside. Because if they're just actions, if they're just rules that we're living by, it won't mean anything. But if this is stuff that we believe, if this is stuff that we want, we're actually going to do these things. You know, we're going to live by the rules, even if we hadn't heard of the rules, if we undergo internal transformation. So that's sort of part of the idea behind chivalry. And yeah, I've always been fascinated by knights and with sort of like mythological tales and heroes. So I did some research and found some rules that somebody said knights lived by, and that's what each of the chapters is based on.
Such as, give me a couple of rules that they live by.
Absolutely. I will practice self-control and selflessness is one of them. Chapter 3. Chapter 4 is I will respect life and freedom. Chapter 5 is I will fight only for the sake of those who are unable to defend themselves or in the defense of justice. So things like that, that really are, if they're all put together, if they're not just words, they can be revolutionary.
Knights were for freedom? I thought they served the king.
It sounds like.
Well, but they had this code. They had this code, and I'm sure a lot of them didn't follow it. But the code was you fight for those because you were in the local context, the noble that owned the land that peasants were on. The knights were supposed to defend them from criminals and so on and so forth.
Gotcha. Well, very interesting topic, and so listen, we appreciate you being on with us, Zach. Wish you the best with your book. Chivalry. It's about chivalry and the quest for a personal code of honor in an unjust world. Thank you, Zach. Appreciate it.
Thank you. Appreciate being on.
Zach Hunter is our guest. I think of knights, in knight in shining armor.
Right.
That expression. And they did have shining armor.
Yes.
They did have shining armor.
They were supposed to.